Hello and welcome to Last Mixtape Podcast. My name's Stephen White, and on this week's show, we review Kendrick Lamar's brand new album GNX and the latest music from the week that was. But first, the Imperial phase. Neil Tennant of the Pet Shop Boys described this as a time in an artist's career when they are at their commercial peak and when they can do no wrong. Why, Stephen? I hear you ask. Are you quoting iconic 80s musician Neil Tennant of the Pet Shop Boys in this week's podcast? Well, dear listener, I will be reviewing Kendrick Lamar's brand new album GNX this week. Now, as always at the beginning of this podcast, full disclaimer, this is a full-on vibes podcast. We do reviews a little bit differently here, so there's no numbers, no blow-by-blow account of the songs and all that kind of stuff. We try not to rank albums in this way, but we try to discuss albums through an artistic lens and a theoretical lens as best we can. So that's how we're going to go into this album. My own history with Kendrick Lamar, I believe starts around the time of Damn, the first time I heard Humble. Was really when I was exposed to his music most. I had heard clips of his music before, but hadn't delved as deeply into it till I heard that record. I went back then and listened to Good Kid, Mad City and To Pimp a Butterfly and Mr. Morale and stuff like that, and absolutely fell in love with his artistry and his music. So I'm a big fan of his, and obviously, like everyone else, this summer was captivated by They Not Like Us and Euphoria and 616 as well. Now, before we start as well, this podcast, I just want to shout out a quick other YouTuber and music, a guy who talks about music, FD Signifier, and his incredible video, I'm What the Culture Feeling. And it goes into the entire history, it goes into the history of rap battles, rap itself. It delves into the cultural analysis behind the recent Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef. Delves into that as well, and a lot of the meaning and stuff like that, and comes at it from a cultural perspective of which I could never give you on this video here, because it's absolutely amazing. It's 3 hours long. I've watched it numerous times because I was absolutely captivated by the beef, as I said, during the summer, and FD Signifier, and he does amazing other videos. He has an incredible one on white rappers as well that you definitely check out. It's really cool, so check him out and his videos, FD Signifier. Also, just to kind of talk about the Imperial phase a little bit more after just quoting it there, that's taken as well from an article by Tom Ewing of Pitchfork just called Imperial, talking about Imperial phases and breaking it down into the three headings: command, permission and self-definition, which we will delve into as the podcast goes and this review goes further. So yeah, the video with FT Signifier really, I think, sets the tone for what happened over the summer. But the Drake beef with Kendrick Lamar captured the imagination, not just the rap community, but also the music community and the wider milieu and the wider zeitgeist, I suppose. The songs like Euphoria and They Not Like Us, I think Euphoria is the better track, but They Not Like Us absolutely blew up and really kind of put a lot of talking points, such as the ones discussed in that video, right at the kind of forefront. It captured the culture, as he says, I'm What the Culture Feeling, as well as doing that and the Juneteenth gig where I think he performed it 5 times. It was this huge kind of victory lap of kind of two different, let's call it two different perspectives on hip hop, two different ways of going at it, and kind of historical and commercial, artistic and commercial again, and obviously Kendrick Lamar is on the more historical and artistic side of things, and I suppose Drake is very much on the commercial side of things at all. And yeah, as I say, that kind of really captured things, but I think plays into this idea of the Imperial phase. Now, I think as anything like this, the Imperial phase is a prolonged period of time where an artist is really at the forefront, really kind of directing the culture and music, really breaking boundaries, whilst being also simultaneously commercially successful. His albums, To Pimp a Butterfly, Good Kid, Mad City, Mr. Morale, he's won Pulitzer Prizes and stuff like that. So it's an interesting thing where he has been, in his Imperial phase, he's been defining cultures, kind of challenging other music, challenging other rappers and stuff like that, in a way in which he has somehow maintained that without becoming absorbed by the mainstream, no longer being on the forefront but being in the pack. We were talking about that recently when we were talking about the kind of Linkin Park review, and finding a way of defining yourself. Interesting that then in the Control verse, he kind of cites that, this kind of need for bravado, that need for competition, that need to kind of almost see rap as a competitive thing. It's referenced here in GNX on several occasions. He delves into that, and it really feels like this album, I don't want to call it a victory lap for what happened in the summer, and we'll delve into that a little bit more, but it's kind of feeling of calling oneself the GOAT, being the greatest of all time. And I think he leans on that quite a lot. I think it's interesting that we as a public, we as a consumer of art, we as the audience, or the culture around it, we're always captivated by people who do this. And I always think of it in terms of sport. You think of like Jordan, you think of McEnroe and people like that who would reference themselves and talk in a way, in football, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, talking about himself in the third person. I think we're captivated by it like that. I think we love that. The idea of rap being a competitive sport, almost like boxing or something like that, it's a really interesting way to look at it. And it's an interesting way that Kendrick Lamar almost kind of pushes his Imperial phase through conflict. I think not that he seeks out conflict in his life, but that he seeks out artistic and competitive and rap conflict in order to kind of buoy himself, in order to push himself forward. And that's seen throughout GNX. The album, now this album kind of came out of nowhere for him, 6th album in total, and just kind of like appeared last Friday. Now there was hints at it. There was hints that he had new releases. Squabble Up featured on a Not Like Us video at the very start, great kind of black and white start where he's kind of pointing this lighter to the kind of strobe lighting and pointing the lighter to the thing. And again, that people were saying that was a bit of a victory lap in the video and stuff like that. And kind of gearing up towards this, and kind of it does seem like a bit of an album that has come out of the blue, but indeed here it is. And it's starting out with whacked out murals, and again coming into that idea of being the GOAT, embodying that, knowing that you're in your Imperial phase, knowing that you're the one who is now, after the beef with Drake and everything else, kind of has this room to kind of be like, yeah, I'm the guy, it's me, I'm the fella, like I'm the one who's going to drive the kind of the direction of hip hop and drive the direction of music as well. I love how he embodies this though. His lyrical ability is incredible on this. Old soul bitch, I probably built them pyramids, which I fucking love. As just like I love that kind of bravado, and it's again in that in talking about that in just to give reference again to FT Signifier in his video, and talking about that competitive element of rap, and that's where it kind of a lot of it came out of, just kind of jawing at the mouth and stuff like that. And it's incredible to see this throughout the album. And Hey Now, featuring Dodie Six, he references, I think, the Drake beef with I Just Strangled Me a Goat, which was in 2003, 2004, which once again is kind of like, I think in Control, doesn't he say, fuck the big three, it's just big me? Which is just this, real kind of confidence and real like, no, if there's going to be anyone in their Imperial phase, if there's going to be anyone at the forefront of it, it's going to be one person. I think in one of the tracks in the Kendrick beef as well, he says like, this crown's heavy. I'm not just going to hand it over to you. It's mine. And I really do think that like flows through this album and flows through some of his music, that competitive nature, whilst also having obviously a socially conscious side to it, and a want to express his own background and express how him and his community and everyone can grow through those things, especially in things like Mr. Morale. I think Damn is a more I don't want to say a cynical album, but not as hopeful. Let's say it that way. Squabble Up as well, which as I say, featured at the start of the Day Not Like Us video. Really musically, I think as well embodies that kind of like, reincarnated is the very first lyric. Reincarnation actually comes up a few times in this, which is a very interesting little thread throughout the album. And you wonder if we want to talk about the victory lap aspect of this, if this is him kind of saying, I'm the guy now. This is me. Here's an album. And he didn't spend any time working on this, and that that he didn't really kind of focus in on what he wants to do, but it almost kind of feels like, hey, here's an album, I'm in charge now, I'm the guy, I've always been the guy, and I'm continuing to be so. Squabble Up really does feel like a little bit of like, hey, if you want to come for me, but I'm going to be ready. Indeed, on Man at the Garden, he just straight up calls himself the GOAT, and that everyone's lucky that he's just around. And again, I don't know about you, the viewer or the listener, but I love that. I love that idea of just being like, hey, I'm the best. And if you don't think I'm the best, come at me, but see what happened to the last guy. And as well, I think the album isn't all him kind of doing a victory lap. It isn't all this kind of the king on his throne kind of type stuff. Luther, which features SZA, is probably the best song on the album, and really shows, again, kind of almost in the offhand way of just like, oh, and I can also do this, which is this beautiful back and forth vocally with SZA throughout it. Was also, again, I think the lyric is people want a kumbaya, nah. Which is just great. It's just like, you might want to everyone get around the campfire. We're all friends. Like, no, I'm still that guy. I'm still gonna like challenge everybody, which I think is absolutely brilliant. But I think that song again just shows the artistry of Kendrick Lamar as somebody who is just above and beyond his game. And I think that is the thing about GNX. Is it his best album? No, it is not his best album. I think a lot of people would say, and I think for cultural reasons as well, to Pimp a Butterfly is probably it. Although I would probably go back to songs on Damn a lot more, especially Humble. But I think in terms of artistry, in terms of cultural relevance, it's got to be To Pimp a Butterfly. I think but don't get me wrong, this is a great, great album. But it does feel a little bit like, okay, here's an album, here's what I can do. Almost that is the bravado of it. That is the kind of competitiveness of it, of just kind of like, I'm so good, I'm just going to release this. It also feels like, because of everything that happened with They Not Like Us and Juneteenth gig and everything, that he's so on the zeitgeist, so on the tip of everyone's tongue. And like, obviously he must be in a lot of ways, because he, like, in that terms of like the Imperial phase of being also a commercial success, while it's also driving the culture, while it's also creating new things, like that broke out everywhere, way beyond just the rap community and the rap scene. It just broke out in so many ways that even me, a 38-year-old white man from Ireland who's generally into kind of goth music and indie, I was absolutely captivated by it. This album does feel a little bit like maybe a button on it rather than a victory lap of, okay, I did this, here's what I did, but I'm the guy now, and here's an album to prove it. So I think that really kind of plays into that. In terms of the Imperial phase, the command aspect of it, I think he's commanded that presence since To Pimp a Butterfly. He has commanded the culture in that way. He has been breaking the mold. He has been the one people on the tips of people's tongues. He has been the one who has transitioned into commercial field, whilst it never feel. And I know he's done some guest verses with people, but that's neither here nor there. His albums are really the thing I think you can judge people on. And in those albums, he made the mainstream come to him. He didn't do anything that where you feel, oh, he's trying to be commercial. He just was what people wanted. And again, that's probably something about They Not Like Us, is that I think people wanted that. I think there's people who wanted to hear that lyrically. There's people who wanted to hear it. I think and the fact that he was doing it kind of for himself in one way, of kind of slaying the dragon in his mind, whatever side of the Drake beef you kind of landed on. He I think he partially did it for himself, but I think partially another way because he is a great lover of the history of hip hop, especially people like Tupac, which obviously came into the beef with Drake using an AI version of Tupac, which is an awful thing to do, in my opinion, a terrible thing to do. And really just kind of recapturing that. And I think as well that plays into the idea of the reincarnation throughout the album. So the command aspect of the Imperial phase, absolutely. I think there's probably, if you're like, and this is from my point of view, is there a rapper out there that is comparable in ability and in reach and in thematic and artistic brilliance than Kendrick? I would say not right now. Permission, absolutely, that's there as well, because the culture, the music, the fans, people absolutely adore him, and you could see that through it. There's an incredible, I got absolutely hooked on this during the summer. There's an incredible reaction video to him dropping the songs during the Drake beef, and you just see people's reactions to the song coming out and songs coming out, and even Meet the Grahams, which is incredibly dark, and it's amazing. And so that, and Juneteenth as well, that gig, which I watched as well, I just thought, wow, this is somebody like who has everybody on his side. So that idea of the permission, that people want this, that this isn't like an industry plant, that this is something that is organic, it is a natural. The audience, the music community wanted this. And I think that's sometimes something that gets lost when people are trying to drive the culture artificially through commercial means, that that there isn't a permission there, that they just kind of insist somebody upon music. And in a kind of a way, Kendrick insists himself upon it. And I think there's so much, again, I've harped on about it so many times, but do check out that FT Signifier video, because it has so much of the cultural aspects of this, and I loved it. But the permission is definitely there. And the self-definition, well, I think GNX, the album, is the self-definition. It is kind of that idea of reincarnation. I'm reborn into something now where I can, and I've, he said, as he said in the Control verse and stuff like that, that fuck the big three, it's just big me. I'm the guy. Here's an album to prove it, as I said. And so the self-definition, the self kind of, as we talk about people like Zlatan Ibrahimovic or McEnroe or Michael Jordan or people like that, or even Tyson, the idea of being like, I'm the greatest, or Muhammad Ali, I suppose, more in boxing, of I'm the greatest, I'm the best, me. And that is the self-definition of it. And all those people in certain ways, maybe not Zlatan Ibrahimovic, I'm a Liverpool fan, so maybe Mo Salah instead. But no, the self-definition is most certainly there throughout this album. Again, I don't think it's his best work, but what isn't his best work is still amazing work. I think some people would be lucky to have one T-Pab, or Mr. Morale, or Damn, or Good Kid, Mad City. He has 4 or 5 of them, so that's incredible. So yeah, I think it's brilliant. I really do love as well, as I say, about this kind of the idea of the goatness and of it, and the idea that he kind of drives his art and he drives himself through conflict. It's brilliant. It's so visceral. It's so incredible to watch somebody's art grow that way. Even when you watch the video to They Not Like Us. I watched so many breakdowns of that too, where the kind of the visual aspect of it, the things that have meaning to his community and where he's from, and things that are kind of subliminal meaning to other things within that community that me as kind of a casual observer in that way wouldn't get, is incredible. But I like the way that even in kind of he kind of feeds off that, and he's driven by that, and GNX does feel like that. Whether or not there'll be more to GNX, I don't know. There is kind of rumblings about that there might be more to this, because of again, there's like a lot of what he puts in his work and his videos kind of alludes to other things and alludes to means something, I suppose. And I think there's 2 cars in the promo for this in a different song and stuff like that. But anyway, we can only review what's in front of us and talk about what's in front of us. So I really, really did enjoy this album. What do you think, though? If you're a Kendrick fan, but what do you think? Are you a Kendrick fan? Do you think he is in his Imperial phase? Is he on the Zeitgeist? Is he part of it? Has he been absorbed by the mainstream? Maybe you think this is his best album. Maybe you think it's his worst album. I don't know. What do you think? Is Kendrick Lamar in his Imperial phase? Is he in command? Does he have permission? And has he self-defined himself within those streams? Is he like Neil Tennant in Pet Shop Boys? Who knows? But please let me know in the comments below. Yeah, this is my review of Kendrick Lamar GNX. Did I like it? Absolutely. Yes, dear listener, they seek him here, they seek him there, those musos seek him everywhere. Is he in heaven or is he at the disco? The damned elusive Count of Monte playlist. Yes. Dear listener, the styling profile limousine Ryan Jeff Line, playlist making son of a gun, has once again returned from the shores of Playlistia to bring you a beautiful bounty of the brand new music from the Irish music scene on TLMT's Irish Mixtape on Spotify. Shall we begin? I think we shall, this week with Melina Malone and If I Had to Change, and what an opening it is. A beautiful song that itself opens with a kind of retro kind of feel, almost like it's kind of a piece of found sound or a found recording from kind of the old soul days or old jazz days of the 50s and 60s and stuff like that. And it is a beautiful recording that opens out into more contemporary and more modernistic leanings to that soul R&B genre. And indeed, the great thing about Melina Malone's output is her voice, how she sings, how she portrays herself, how she commands the stage, even when it is as a recording. And it is incredibly hazy, smoky. It's evocative of that of which it evokes at the beginning, which is the kind of the old time a soul kind of jazz sound and kind of almost in a club or something like that. And it is beautifully done. And as I say, she takes center stage as the performer, as the narrator, as you will, and really kind of lives up to that of which she evokes in a song. So yeah, if I had to change, Melina Malone back with a brand new song, and yeah, do check it out because it is on the playlist right now. Next up, we have a little change of pace with Annie Dog and The Feeling in My Fingertips. And this is kind of a hazy, dreamlike track once again. It has that bedroom pop feel whilst also contrasted with the electronic and percussive nature of the backdrop too, with this kind of floaty vocal that just kind of, as I say, just kind of on top of the rest of the music, on top of the kind of the juxtaposition and the contrast within it, really creates something that draws you in and is beautifully performed and portrayed by Annie Dog. It's a great track in terms of how it contrasts different textures and different sounds into one music and one singular music from Annie Dog. So a series of great releases from them with the Feeling in My Fingertips, and it on the playlist. Go check it out because it's there. It's on the playlist. Next up, though, we have James Vincent McMorrow and his brand new single Rent California. And this is an interesting one from James, as it has this kind of laid back, harmony rich kind of not Laurel Canyon, would you say? It's not a million miles away from what we would call that, or at least what Spotify would call that in some sort of AI playlist. But yes, it is kind of in that kind of zone, in that area, was also being a James Vincent McMorrow's track. It has those kind of layered harmonies, those layered vocals that kind of reach and kind of soar. It also shows kind of the evolving nature of James Vincent McMorrow himself with a series of his albums. If you kind of follow them the whole way through, they do go through different tastes and different genres and different fields, and he has been able to put himself within those different milieus whilst also maintaining oneself and maintaining his own sound. And Rent California does that with something that's laid back, does really kind of center around the songwriting, does centers around how the harmonies are portrayed and the performance as well. And James Vincent McMorrow is somebody who can do all of those things with the songwriting and the performing and the harmonies. So yeah, it really plays to his strengths, and it's Rent California. Check it out wherever you want to check out his music. I'm not the boss of you. I'm merely the Count of Monte Playlisto. Up next, another singer-songwriter, and we go with Adrian Crowley and his brand new song, Measure of Joy. And this is kind of an intricate track because it has a lot of quite a sonic abstraction to it, whilst in the center having this kind of croonerist vocal. It's almost Leonard Cohen like, everybody knows that the dice are loaded kind of feel to it. And he holds command of that. And it's an interesting thing because the song isn't too long. It doesn't outstay its welcome. That you gotta, I think a lot of the time with those kind of tracks, for me at least, you gotta kind of know when to get out, know when that kind of croonerism can, and he does it really well. And again, it has that Cohen-esque delivery, even in the kind of the musicality behind it and the feel behind it was also abstracted in a kind of way the Melina Malone song was, abstracting the retro with the contemporary. And indeed it does that with Measure of Joy. I believe this is from an upcoming album as well by Adrian Crowley. It'd be interesting to have a listen to that. Up last and final, but by no means least, the Count's final pick of the week. And it's a new one. It's a Barra Donovan and a track called Heartbreak Station. And this is a well-written, intricate little introduction to a songwriter as well. From the beginning of it as well, I was like, oh, which way are we going with this? But the band kind of kick in, the songwriting kicks in, the performance kicks in into what is really a nice little gem of a track from an artist that was under my radar. And a songwriter again, so we're finishing off with a trio of songwriters, singer-songwriters, if you want to call it that genre, I don't know. But it's a really cool little track. I really enjoyed it. It opens out an EP, and I think it's definitely worth a listen as well, and definitely worth kind of keeping an eye on. You'd be interested to see how some of the rougher edges are frayed off. A little bit more, I think, command of the vocal and command of oneself as well. But the songwriting is there, the production is there, the knowing of the self is there as well. So yeah, interesting to kind of end on this one. But Heartbreak Station by Barra Donovan. Check out the EP as well. That's also on the playlist. And that is it for the Count of Monty playlist for this week. But by God, dear listener and dear viewer, please check in next week, because the Count of Monty playlisto may very well be taking over the show with a little playlisto of his own. We are going into that time of year where lists are made, and it's not just Santa Claus making the lists. Indeed, the Count of Monty playlist though has lists of his own. So check in next week because the Count will be back. And so it goes, and there it went. But before I go, thank you for listening and watching the Last Mixtape podcast here on YouTube, Spotify, and indeed on Apple. If you could subscribe, comment below, and share this episode and help the podcast grow, I'd be eternally grateful. You can also contact me via Stephen@thelastmixtape.com. If you want any tracks to be put forward to the Count of Monty playlisto himself, I will be sure to pass them on. As always, I am not the Count, but I do know him. But that's enough of that. For now, that was the Last Mixtape podcast. I was Stephen White. You were the listener and the viewer. Hey, so long.